Hey guys, today I'm with Tammy Guler Loeb, who's an executive and career coach. How are you doing, Tammy?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's the beginning of 2019. Um, Tammy and I just found out that we went to the same college, which is awesome because our college was totally like a really unique experience to be a part of, Hampshire College.
Yeah, that was fun, huh? It's always fun when you discover somebody else went to that hippie school down the road from UMass.
It's like what I've found is that everyone I know who went to Hampshire and then I meet them like after Hampshire, we always have so much in common, and especially if our lives end up crossing paths afterwards. We If you go to Hampshire, there's something that's you have a certain set of qualities and traits. You're creative minded, you're independent, and this is all stuff that it's just nice to be with people that have the same values, especially because we're doing something similar now.
Yeah, yeah, it's true because given my work as an executive and career coach, I'm always encouraging people to not settle for what they already know. And I think one of the mottos of Hampshire is to know is not enough,
Mm,
right?
right.
And the whole idea being that, always knowing the right questions to ask. It's not about having all the answers.
Mm,
So the same thing is true of when you work as a coach is I'm always helping people figure out what are the best questions they can be asking themselves and others in order to get more clarity and direction in terms of what they want for themselves.
mm. And what is the biggest what is the biggest problem that your clients face?
Wow. I think the biggest problem that well there's sort of two pathways in terms of why people come to me. There are people who are out of work more often than not because they've been laid off, and so they're looking for another role, and they also see it as a pivot point or a transition point where they can consider maybe doing something a little different or wanting their next workplace or their next role to be even more satisfying. Um, and then there are people who are already working who are saying to me, look, I'm just not that happy. I'm not doing well where I work, or I'm struggling with my boss, or so there's a blend of things. But I would say that the thing that and people don't always come to me with this complaint, but it usually boils down to this: people often are in a line of work that is usually somewhat agreeable with them or that they feel competent in. Where the difficulties lie, more often than not, but not all the time, is the culture, is the organizational culture, the culture fit, the fit of the person within the organization, within the team, the relationship with their coworkers, with their boss, with their direct reports. And this is the thing that I find where that's where people are driven to some kind of a state of unhappiness and discontent,
Mm,
is being in a situation where they don't feel like they can completely be themselves or be their best selves. And it ends up creating this sort of fuzzy place where, I've had people come to me who say, like lawyers, lots and lots of lawyers, I don't know if I want to practice law anymore.
right.
Then when we talk further about what's going on in the firm that they're in and what the dynamics are there, where the pressures are, and all of that, it turns out they actually like practicing law. They just don't like practicing it in the situation they're in, or they're not feeling valued or appreciated. And I'm not talking about people who need, positive strokes all the time. But there is this point where if you don't get some kind of feedback on your performance or your contributions,
Right.
you don't know whether you're making an impact. You don't know whether it matters what you're doing.
And
So
if you're
people,
valued.
what's that? They want to feel valued, right? and they want to feel seen for who they are and what they bring to the table. And I have a lot of people who will also say to me, "Oh, I don't need acknowledgement." I say that's not true. We do need acknowledgement, not applause, but we need people to just say, "Look, I really appreciated it when you did thus and such, because it made a difference in our bottom line, or it made a difference in the lives of our clients," or whatever kind of work they're doing. So,
Yeah. No, I really like that. I think that's really true. Like people that I speak to who are my age and just kind of people who are struggling with their careers, it's most often that it's not really the job itself; it's the culture, and they don't feel appreciated in the job, or they feel overworked, and they feel underpaid, or whatever it is.
yeah.
Um, and that tends to be the problem more so than the actual job itself. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and there's another element to that I just want to add to what you're saying, and that is that people want to feel that their bosses have, or their organizations have, some investment in their growth and development as a professional.
Yeah.
And so when they, request to take a class, or they request to go to a conference and it's denied, or when they keep getting work piled on them, but nobody is saying, "Let me help you figure this out."
Right.
Or, "I understand that there's a bit of a learning curve here for you to learn this. I want you to stretch yourself. I want you to grow." Those are the things. When those things are not in place, that's where you start to lose people.
Mm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm thinking of a friend right now who's literally going through that exact thing.
Yep.
And what tends to be like the solution, for lack of a better word? Where do they end up getting to at the end?
Well, if they're working with a coach, which of course, at that point they need somebody who's a champion of them, who can not just be a cheerleader, although that's part of it, because sometimes people need their spirits lifted too. But I think they need a couple of things to find a better way. They need more information. A
Hmm.
lot of times people are only going on assumptions, that they see something and they make assumptions. They make assumptions that their boss doesn't care about them, or they make assumptions. And I would say they need more information about what's really going on in the organization, with the boss, with the boss's boss. They may need more information about what they can do to step up and make themselves be seen more.
Mm.
People often think they've done something so great and they say, "Nobody noticed." It's like, "Well, did you tell them that you did it?" "Oh, no." Well, you have to, there are things that everything's a two-way street. So there's information usually that they're lacking. I think the other thing is just some strategies. How do you manage upwards if you need to? How
Mm.
do you navigate a culture that, really, let's say, values certain qualities and not others? I have clients who've worked in some research and policy organizations, for example, and some of these clients have master's degrees, but it's the people with the PhDs in those environments that really rule. So if
Mm.
you have a master's degree in some of these organizations, I won't name them, um, you're considered to be, a lesser person in the mix. There's a real sort of arrogance in those kinds of environments. So if you're in an environment where there's, let's say, toxic kinds of dynamics, like there's a lot of blame games going on, or people aren't sharing information readily with each other, or there's I mean, all organizations have politics, but if there's a lot of politics going on, sometimes the solution is to find another job.
Right. Right.
So it really depends on the person and their situation. So the solutions can be employing some strategies to try to interact with the environment and people differently. It can also be that you need to shift your mindset and get
Mm.
rid of some of the assumptions that you're
Mm.
basing a lot of things on. Or it might be that you need a complete change.
Right. I like that. It's not one solution. It could be different things for different people.
Mhm.
I like that terminology you said, like figuring out how to manage upwards. This is like kind of these small problems that people face that are kind of like your manager or your boss is giving you too much work. You're overburdened. and then often it's like an issue of you're not setting boundaries clear enough. And it's like these small things that we're never really taught how to do in school and
Right.
anywhere, that end up really creeping in on us. So
They creep in and creep in to the point where we start to get used to some of those dynamics, and we don't even realize sometimes just how stressed out or unhappy we might be.
yes.
And I've talked to tons of people who after, let's say, I talked to someone just the other day who had been off of work for 10 days, and she said, I'm sleeping better.
Mhm.
I'm eating differently. I feel differently just from being out of the work environment for 10 days. So it can really take a toll on somebody's physical and mental health too. And I know that from my own experience, having been an employee for many years prior to uh, going into my own business. So these are things that really can affect people on so many levels.
Mm,
And if they don't notice it and they don't recognize it, pay attention to it, it's harder to do anything about it.
right. And that definitely makes a lot of sense. Again, like I think what you're saying is resonating with a lot of people who experience those problems, and maybe they're aware of it, or they're talking about it to some people, but they're not really taking action on it, or maybe they are, but they don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think everything you're saying is really resonant in terms of like what I witnessed.
Mhm.
And I've experienced it myself in different doses, and like managing certain clients and having there be a lot of scope creep, and then having to figure out how to set boundaries with them. Um, so yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I want to yes and that, Matt,
Do
and
it.
say that it is about setting boundaries, but in part of the strategy with setting those boundaries is always framing it, how you frame it to
Mm,
somebody. You want to frame it in a way where you're addressing something that's important to them.
mm,
Because if you do that, they are going to be far more likely to listen to what you have to say. So it's usually in the frame of something that's important to them, or something that is important to the success of the organization. Because if you make it all about you, like you're setting boundaries for yourself, or you're trying to communicate things about what you need, because people are saying, well, you should speak up and ask for what you need. Yes, you should. And
mm.
make sure that you frame it in a way that it can be heard.
Right. No, exactly. I think that's really important, and no one really talks about that.
No, we don't learn. Even at Hampshire College, we didn't learn these things.
No, definitely not. So how do you know if you're just at a job that's not for you, or if
Mm.
you should just keep going with that job and like work on your mindset and your tactics?
So wait, can you
So
ask that
yeah,
again?
I'll ask in a different way. So how do you know when it's time to quit
Ah,
versus, yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, I look, we're all individuals and we all have different tolerances for certain things. But I think that um, I think there's some very, I wouldn't even say extreme, because I think too many people go through this already. But if you've reached a point where getting out of bed in the morning is really difficult because you hate going to that place,
Right.
that's a sign. It
Okay.
may sound obvious, but you would be surprised how many people are doing that year after year after year. If you start to tell yourself, well, I can't leave my job because
Mm,
I'm making good money, I have good benefits, I have this, I have that, I would say, don't leave your job today, but start, either working with a coach or exploring what else is possible. It's so easy to look at where the glass is half full, right?
right.
And you almost start bargaining with yourself, like, oh, I'm just going to hold on till thus and such, because then I'll get my 2 weeks vacation and I have a trip planned and this
Right.
and that.
Right. Right.
And again, I'm not saying that those are wrong things, but I think when you start having a lot of physical issues, you're either having trouble sleeping at night, or you're gaining weight, you're losing weight, you're starting to drink more, you're managing your stress in ways that is really unhealthy. Those are signs that you should be paying attention to. I'm
Mm,
not saying, oh, so stop drinking, go on a diet, start exercising, because that can be stressful too, to try to make all those changes. But I think you want to say, wait a minute, I, you know, do I like who I'm being day to day at work?
Right.
You
Right.
know, because that's the point where you say, if I don't like who I'm being at work, or I don't like the people I'm working with, or I don't like what my company is doing to people or
Right.
doing, those are the signs that tells you it's time to move on.
Mm.
But it's scary. Moving on is not always easy.
Right.
So, you can't do it alone. The people who come to me have tried to do it alone first. And once they start meeting with me, they realize there's so many different steps they didn't even consider that would have made it a lot easier. And
Um,
I'm not saying that everybody should come work with me, please. But there are a lot of things about looking for work even now that were different, let's say 5 or 10 years ago.
totally.
So if
Yeah.
you haven't looked for a job in 5 years, there's some new strategies that you have to be aware of in order to know what to look for. But yeah, when you're working full time, it's challenging to do a full out job search. So
Oh yeah, just in terms of your time and your energy too.
right.
So yeah, like having a coach who tells you exactly what you should be doing at this point, that helps so much because otherwise you'd have to be like stressing yourself out, looking for all the next steps and knowing what to do, and that's a really hard process to do.
Well, and let me clarify that the purest of purest coaches will not tell you what to do,
True, 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 true.
right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we don't help you think through what your choices and options are and encourage you to choose some of them strategically and have that conversation with you. So yes, there is a way in which I might tell someone what I would do or what I think they ought to do, but more often than not, the aim in coaching is to get the client to really take full ownership of whatever choices they make.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who are in the position of they're aware, like everything you said, like they know that they don't like this environment they're working for. They don't like they're not satisfied in their job, but still they rationalize that excuse that I'm making money and I just can't quit or something. Um, how do you deal with that, or like, what would you say?
No, I mean, I was one of those people. I was in a job many, many years ago, and 6 months into the job, I knew I had to get out, and it took me another 2 years to leave.
Mm,
So for 2 years, I knew I shouldn't be there. And so that's probably why I do what I do now. Um, but I think that um, you got to start somewhere. It's not something that you just say one day, okay, I'm going to leave, and it's going to be in 3 months, I'm going to leave.
right.
Um, it's more like, okay, I've made the decision that I need to leave. However, I still need to be very present at work, do my work. Don't go in there like I've got one foot out the door. At the same time, I need to start talking to people and people who I feel comfortable talking to initially and start feeling things out. Where might I want to work? Are there certain companies or organizations whose work really interests me? Can I, start building my LinkedIn network a little bit more if you haven't been working on that? That's really important.
Mm,
But I would say start, with your leisure hours, go make an effort to hang out with some friends who are doing interesting work or who like
mm,
what they're doing for work. And start asking them, so you know me or you've known me over the years and you know how I'm feeling about work these days. What would you recommend that I be looking for? Or what would you say are the top 3 things you know about me that are really that are qualities that I could bring to a workplace? So you want to start thinking about how do I craft or develop my brand? You
right.
know,
Right.
People didn't think in terms of branding even a few years ago,
Yeah, no, especially.
individual branding, right? But in this job market, you really do have to think about who you are in the workplace, not just what skills and knowledge base you have. Because, especially living in major cities, like you're in New York, I'm in Boston, everybody's educated, everybody's qualified and overqualified. So how do you distinguish yourself? So you have to start developing that picture. So even though you've made this decision, let's say to leave, or that you know the signs are there, you can still give yourself some time to kind of begin to explore. You know, when I say go talk to people, I mean you got to network. But it's not just networking for a job. It's really more networking for information. What information do you need to know so that as you go forward, you know what it is you're going towards?
Right.
You know, I think some people get into a comfort zone, right? With even a bad situation, as the expression goes, you know, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, right? Um, so you need to give yourself some time, especially if you're working full time, to just, you know, meet a friend for coffee on a Saturday morning. Go, meet a friend for a drink after work, or grab dinner with somebody. But start talking to people who know you, like you, trust you, support you. Start with your inner circle and then work outward from there, because every person that you talk to, they know somebody else who you should talk to. And so I think that if you do that, even a few times a week, if you can, that in and of itself is going to help to kind of unlock that sort of stuck place you might be feeling you're in.
Right. I like that a lot. Like every single person you meet, every connection you have, every coffee meeting that you have opens up a world of possibilities.
And that's the world where you're going to find your next job. I mean,
Exactly.
the odds are 80 to 85% that you will find your next job through not your first degree or your warmest connections, but through a third or fourth degree from that person.
Oh wow, yeah.
And that,
That's wonderful.
yeah,
And it's not like going into those meetings where it's like, oh, I need a job, get me a job. You're going
no,
with
not at all.
right.
It's more like, you know what? I'm in a stuck place. I need more information. I've got to start talking to people and getting real, on the ground, live information. What's going on out there? Who's working where? What are they learning? What are their work environments like? What do they like about it? What don't they like about it?
Right.
And then who else do they know who I should be talking to? I always tell people, don't ever leave a conversation with somebody without at least asking, who else would you recommend that I speak with?
I like that.
Because, otherwise you're shortchanging yourself.
Mm,
The key is, a client of mine said this to me a few years ago. He said, the way I think about networking is it's research. I'm doing research. And he was spot on. That's exactly what it is. It's research. It's, yes, somewhere along the way, somebody may know of a job that you should apply for. Absolutely. But you're really there to talk to people about industries, different types of roles, different types of companies, what's going on out there. It doesn't have to be going to lots of large, networking events and shaking hands and exchanging business cards, although there's some value in that. I say people are better off going to more focused kinds of events, like industry events and
right.
things like that.
Right. I like that. Yeah, that's all really good advice. So if someone wants to work with you, someone wants to start working with you, how can they do that?
Well, they can get in touch with me through my website, www.tammygoulerloeb.com. And then the other way that people can reach me or get to know me a little bit is through my podcast, which is called Work from the Inside Out. And my podcast, and that's also workfromtheinsideout.com. It's linked directly to my website.
Mm,
But that's another great way. And that's, podcasts, that's a freebie. I interview on a weekly basis. I interview people who have made some kind of career transition or work transition and how they did it. So these are real people who had real challenges and made it happen and are a lot happier for it. And so those are great, especially if people are commuting, a half an hour or more per day, they could listen to my podcast and learn a little bit there.
nice. That's awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
I'll definitely include links to check those things out here.
Oh.
Um, yeah, thanks so much, Tammy. Thanks for sharing all that knowledge. I hope anyone watching this can have some takeaways and some action steps to apply to their own life. Really appreciate everything that you and taking the time to chat with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.